The air in the bunker was thick with the smell of damp concrete, stale cigarette smoke, and a peculiar, sharp odor of ozone and hot metal. It was the smell of desperation, Klaus Richter decided, and of a dying dream. He stood before a vast schematic, a labyrinth of lines and calculations etched onto a translucent sheet, illuminated from behind. This was the A9-A10, the Americarakete, a theoretical two-stage rocket designed to rain fire on New York City. It was a ghost, a phantom of an empire that was already crumbling into rubble above their heads. Klaus, at 35, was one of the Third Reich's brightest minds, a physicist who had once been seduced by the promise of unlimited resources and the chance to touch the future. Now, that future felt like a tomb. The distant, rhythmic crump of Soviet artillery was a constant reminder that the world they had built was measured in hours, not years. "They are calling for you, Herr Doctor," a young, hollow-eyed technician whispered from the doorway. "The Obergruppenführer is here." Klaus nodded, not turning from the schematic. The Americarakete. It would never be built. None of them would. They were secrets that would die with them, buried under 100 feet of German earth. He thought of the other projects, the ones scattered across the Reach, each a desperate gamble, a flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness of total war. Did they change the war? The question echoed in his mind as he walked the cold, narrow corridor to the briefing room. He knew the official answer, the one they were all supposed to parrot. But the real answer was a complex, terrifying tapestry of what-ifs and might-have-beens. His journey into this heart of darkness had begun not in a bunker, but in the clear, thin air of Peenemünde. 6 years earlier, the Baltic wind whipped across the testing grounds, carrying the salty tang of the sea. In 1939, Peenemünde was a place of exhilarating possibility. Klaus, fresh from Göttingen University, had been recruited by the brilliant, driven Wernher von Braun. Here, the lines between science fiction and reality blurred. They were not just building weapons, they were reaching for the stars. The F4 rocket, which the propaganda ministry would later christen the V2, was their obsession. "Forget artillery," Klaus von Braun had said, his eyes alight with a visionary's fire, gesturing towards a skeletal rocket frame. This is the future, a weapon that leaves no sound of its approach. It arrives from the edge of space. How can one defend against that? Back then, it was easy to ignore the men in black SS uniforms who patrolled the perimeter. It was easy to lose oneself in the beautiful, brutal mathematics of ballistics and liquid fuel propulsion. The war was a distant abstraction, a political necessity to secure the funding for their cosmic ambitions. They were pioneers, not pawns. But the war ceased to be abstract. The reports filtered in. The slave labor from the nearby camp of Trassenheide, the emaciated bodies of Polish and Russian prisoners who built the very launch sites from which their dreams would soar. Klaus had protested once, quietly, to von Braun. "We are scientists, Wernher. This is monstrous." Von Braun's face had hardened, the visionary replaced by the pragmatist. "The monster provides the fuel, Klaus. Look at the rocket. Look at what we are achieving. History will remember the achievement, not the cost." It was a Faustian bargain, and Klaus had accepted it. The intellectual thrill was too potent, the pull of the impossible too strong. The first successful launch of the F4 in October 1942 was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. The 14-ton rocket, a gleaming white dart, rose on a pillar of flame, piercing the sky, a silent, powerful promise of a new era. They had cheered, men crying with the sheer magnitude of their accomplishment. They had touched space. But that promise was immediately perverted. The V2 was not a tool for exploration. It was an instrument of terror. In September 1944, the first operational V2s struck London. Klaus was in a command bunker in The Hague when the reports came in. There was no glory, only a cold, clinical detachment, a map, a coordinate, a launch order. Then, hours later, a message from a spy in London. A massive explosion in Chiswick. No warning, no sound of aircraft. 3 civilians dead, 17 injured. He had excused himself and been violently sick in a latrine. This was his life's work. This was the beautiful mathematics made manifest. A crater, rubble, and broken bodies. The V2 was indeed a wonder. It was supersonic, unstoppable, a psychological terror weapon of unprecedented nature. But as the reports of thousands of civilian casualties mounted, Klaus began to understand its strategic futility. It was random, inaccurate, and phenomenally expensive. The resources poured into the V2 program, the materials, the skilled manpower, the vast underground factory at Mittelwerk built with the blood of thousands of slave laborers were astronomical. He remembered a debate with Albert Speer, the armaments minister, in early 1944. Speer, ever the technocrat, was questioning the program's efficiency. Klaus, be honest with me. You are firing these things at a city the size of London. What is the military impact? You are hitting houses, shops, streets. You are not hitting factories, airfields, docks with any reliable precision. The V2 is a weapon of vengeance, not victory. Is it worth the cost? Klaus had given the party line. Of course. It breaks their morale, Herr Minister. It is a weapon against which there is no defense. But Speer was right. The V2 did not change the strategic balance. It did not stop the Allied bombing campaign that was systematically dismantling German industry. It did not halt the advance of the Red Army in the East. It was a spectacular, terrifying, and ultimately futile sideshow. It killed nearly 9,000 civilians and military personnel in England, and on the continent, a tragic loss of life. But it did not delay the end by a single day. In fact, some historians would later argue that the immense diversion of resources to the V2 and its predecessor, the V1 flying bomb, actually shortened the war. The V1, a crude, buzzing pulse jet-powered cruise missile, was easier to produce and intercept, but it consumed vast amounts of scarce steel and high-grade fuel. The V-weapons were Hitler's first great secret hope. They were revolutionary, but they were a dead end. They were a glimpse of a future of warfare that the Reich would not live to see. And then there were the other projects, the ones that strayed even further into the realm of science fiction, born in the fever dream reality of the Fourier's court. Klaus was periodically summoned to Berlin to consult with other departments. It was in a heavily guarded villa in Wannsee that he was first introduced to the concept of the Uran project, the nuclear program. Led by Werner Heisenberg, Germany's foremost physicist, it was a source of immense anxiety for the Allies. What if the Nazis got the bomb first? Klaus had sat in on a few meetings. The science was sound, but the execution was a mess. Competing factions, a lack of clear direction from the top, and a critical miscalculation by Heisenberg on the amount of fissile material needed had doomed the project. Hitler, with his obsession for big, tangible Wunderwaffen, miracle weapons, found the abstract nature of atomic physics uninspiring. He wanted a bomb he could see, a giant gun, a super tank. The nuclear program was starved of the colossal Manhattan Project-level resources required. They never got close. The war was changed not by the atomic bomb Germany built, but by the one it failed to build, leaving the field open for the United States to end the war in the Pacific with two blinding flashes that heralded a new, terrifying age. But if the atomic bomb was a road not taken, the aviation projects were a glimpse of a parallel universe. Klaus had visited the secret workshops of the Horten brothers, two brilliant, unorthodox aircraft designers. They were building flying wings, jet-powered, sleek bat-like shapes that looked like they belonged in the next century. The Horten WW2 was a prototype jet-powered flying wing fighter bomber, the first aircraft to incorporate what would later be known as stealth technology, using a carbon-impregnated wood glue in its construction to absorb radar waves. He had stood on the tarmac as the strange, almost alien aircraft taxied. It had no fuselage, no tail. It was just a wing, and it flew with a ghostly silence, its twin-jet engines a whisper compared to the roar of a conventional Messerschmitt. It was breathtaking. But it was too late. Only a few prototypes were ever built. The resources, the infrastructure, the time, they were luxuries the reach no longer possessed. Similarly, the Messerschmitt Me 262, the world's first operational jet fighter, was a marvel. Klaus had seen one tear apart a formation of American B-17 flying fortresses, its 30mm cannons ripping through the lumbering bombers with contemptuous ease. The pilots called it the Schwalbe, swallow. In the hands of a skilled ace like Adolf Galland, it was invincible. But Hitler, in one of his most catastrophic military blunders, had insisted it be used as a fast bomber, a role for which it was utterly unsuited. This delayed its deployment as a fighter for critical months, allowing the Allied bomber streams to continue their devastating work virtually unopposed by this new threat. By the time it was released for its proper role, it was too few, too late, and constantly hampered by a lack of fuel and trained pilots. It was a revolutionary weapon, a quantum leap in aviation technology that could have changed the air war over Germany. But it was hobbled by the myopia of its supreme commander. The same story repeated itself. The Type 21 U-boat, a truly revolutionary submarine that could stay submerged for days and run silent on its electric engines, was a nightmare for the Allies. It could have undone all the hard-won gains in the Battle of the Atlantic. But the bombing campaign disrupted its production. Only a few saw combat, and they never had the chance to form into the wolf packs that would have strangled the sea lanes to Britain. The Maus tank, a 200-ton behemoth, was a testament to German engineering insanity. Klaus had seen it once, a rolling fortress whose very weight crushed the roads it traveled on. It was impervious to almost any Allied tank gun, but it was so slow, so mechanically unreliable, and such a colossal consumer of fuel that it was strategically useless. It never saw combat. It was a solution looking for a problem, a symbol of the Nazi obsession with the colossal and the intimidating over the practical and the effective. As the war entered its final, convulsive phase, the projects became more desperate, more esoteric. Klaus was ordered to review the work of a unit working on a sun gun, Sonnenkanone, a theoretical orbital mirror designed to concentrate sunlight and burn enemy cities. It was pure fantasy. There were rumors of Nazi scientists attempting to build a Bell die Glock, a device that allegedly experimented with anti-gravity and time manipulation, fueled by a mysterious substance called Zerum 525. Klaus dismissed it as occult nonsense, the kind of thing that thrived in the shadowy, irrational corners of Himmler's SS. The real secret weapons were terrible enough. They didn't need mythical ones. Now, in the Berlin bunker in April 1945, all these threads were coming together in a final, grim tapestry. The Obergruppenführer, a man whose uniform seemed to hang on a skeletal frame, stood over a map of Berlin, his knuckles white. The V2 battery at The Hague. Can we retarget it? He rasped. Can we hit Zhukov's command post? Klaus shook his head wearily. The guidance systems are not that precise, Herr Obergruppenführer. We would be as likely to hit our own troops. The SS officer's eyes blazed with a fanatical light. Then we use the chemical warheads. The sarin gas. We have the warheads. Do we not? A chill that had nothing to do with the bunker's temperature ran down Klaus' spine. This was the final, unthinkable step. The nerve agents, another secret weapon, stockpiled but never used, partly for fear of retaliation, partly because even the Nazi high command understood it was a threshold that, once crossed, led to an abyss from which there was no return. The warheads exist, Klaus said carefully. But the delivery system is the same. The wine could blow it back on our own people. It would be indiscriminate. Everything is indiscriminate now, Herr Doctor. The officer screamed, spittle flying from his lips. This is total war. We will take them all with us. But the order was never given. The chain of command had disintegrated. The men who could authorize such an atrocity were dead, fleeing, or preparing their cyanide capsules. The secret of the chemical weapons would remain, for the most part, a secret. A day later, the bunker was in chaos. Papers were being burned, machines smashed. The distant crump of artillery was now the sharp crack of small arms fire in the streets above. The Red Army was in Berlin. Klaus sat at his desk, a single sheet of paper before him. He was not a soldier, he was a scientist. His war was over. He thought of the V2s falling on London, the Me-262s streaking through the skies, the Type 21 U-boats sitting uselessly in their pens, the nuclear program that had led nowhere. He thought of the thousands of slave laborers who had died to build these marvels of engineering. Did they change the war? The answer, he now saw with devastating clarity, was no. Not in any meaningful, strategic sense. They did not avert defeat. They did not turn the tide. They were brilliant, terrifying, revolutionary innovations that were born into a system that was too corrupt, too short-sighted, and too morally bankrupt to wield them effectively. They were sparks of genius in an all-consuming darkness, sparks that were swiftly extinguished. But they did change the next war. They changed the world. The V2 became the foundation for both the American and Soviet space programs. Wernher von Braun and many of his team, including men Klaus knew, would be whisked away to America in Operation Paperclip. Their knowledge would launch satellites, and eventually, men to the moon. The Horten flying wing design would influence American stealth bombers decades later. The Me-262 made every propeller-driven fighter in the world instantly obsolete, and set the template for a generation of jet aircraft. The Type 21 U-boat became the blueprint for all modern submarines. The secret weapons of the Third Reich were not weapons that won a war. They were a cursed inheritance, a bloody down payment on the future. They were the price the world paid for a technological leap, a leap that was conceived in tyranny and born from unimaginable suffering. A young SS guard burst into the room, his face pale. The Russians, they are in the next block. We must go, Herr Doctor. Klaus looked up. He picked up the schematic of the America Rakete, the rocket that was to have terrorized New York. He folded it carefully and placed it in the inner pocket of his jacket. It was not a weapon anymore. It was a passport. He stood, his body aching with a fatigue deeper than sleep could cure. The war was over. The future, a future built on the terrible, brilliant secrets he carried in his mind and in his pocket, was about to begin. He walked out of the room, not towards the fighting, but towards a hidden exit, a man leaving one world of shadows for another, his soul forever burdened by the knowledge of what his genius had helped to create and what it had failed to prevent. The secret weapons had not changed his war, but they would now define the rest of his life and the shape of the world to come.